That evening started like any other corporate gathering Sarah dragged me to. The kind where everyone pretends they're thrilled to be standing around sipping overpriced wine while talking about things they don't care about. It was hosted at her boss's house out in the suburbs, one of those newer developments with winding cul-de-sacs and fresh sod. Fancy but soulless. We parked down the block, and I remember walking up the driveway, noticing how pristine the landscaping was. Sarah made some comment about how the hydrangeas looked intentionally casual, whatever that meant. She was in a flowy green dress, one I'd seen maybe twice before, and had curled her hair, which she rarely did. She looked good, better than good, and I remember thinking I hadn't complimented her yet. I meant to, but something about the evening already felt off, like I was walking into a space that didn't quite have room for me. Inside, the house was buzzing. There were catered trays on the kitchen island, a bartender mixing cocktails in the corner, and music playing. Some indie folk playlist that sounded curated to death. I didn't know anyone except Sarah and maybe one guy from her office I'd met at a holiday dinner 2 years ago. Sarah had immediately slipped into her work mode. Bright smile, effortless laughter, leaning in just a little too close when she spoke to people. I hovered for a bit, tried to make conversation with a couple of guys by the grill, but it was mostly small talk about fantasy football and traffic. Eventually, I excused myself to get some air. I wandered toward the edge of the patio, pretending to look at the landscaping lights. That's when I checked my phone, no new messages, not even a group chat ping. Just me, standing there like the +1 I was, wondering if anyone else could tell I didn't belong. About 45 minutes in, I told Sarah I was heading inside to grab my jacket. She barely registered it, just nodded, still mid-conversation with a tall guy in a light blue shirt who seemed to be getting a little too many laughs out of her. I didn't know it at the time, but that step back into the house, up the carpeted stairs into that quiet second floor, would change everything. The guest bedroom was where we tossed our stuff when we arrived. That's where I was headed. But as I turned the corner into the hallway, I heard her voice, unmistakably hers, carrying from one of the rooms. The door wasn't fully closed. It was cracked an inch, just enough. Her voice was light, tipsy, teasing. And I almost called him Ryan in bed, she said, laughing. Not giggling nervously, not embarrassed, genuinely laughing. Then, a man's voice, low, confident, laughing with her, not at her. You didn't though, right? No. God, no, she said, still laughing. Can you imagine? He would have died. I froze. Every instinct in me screamed to keep walking, to give her privacy, to believe this was some harmless, weird moment that I just misunderstood. But I stood there, barely breathing. He'd never let it go, she added. He's too observant. He notices everything. She said it with a kind of affection that felt like mockery, like someone describing a dog who always waits at the door, thinking it means something. The guy said something else, softer, harder to hear. She laughed again. Then, just before I finally turned away, she said, anyway, that's why I'm not drinking whiskey with you ever again. More laughter. Their laughter. I slipped away silently, like a thief stealing my own sense of peace. I didn't grab my jacket. I walked right past it, down the stairs, out the front door. No one noticed me leave. Not even her. I sat in the car for a while, just breathing. I must have stared at the dashboard clock for 10, maybe 15 minutes before starting the engine. My hands were shaking more than I expected. It was warm outside, but I felt cold. Not angry, not heartbroken, just off, like something fundamental had shifted, and I couldn't quite place what. When she came home later, much later, she found me in the living room with a half-finished beer and the TV on mute. She walked in with that same buzzed energy, kicked off her heels, and flopped onto the couch next to me like everything was normal. You wouldn't believe what the girls dared me to say tonight, she said, reaching for the beer and taking a sip like it was hers. I turned toward her slowly. Oh yeah. She was grinning. It was so dumb. They said I had to go up to someone and say something totally outrageous. So I told this guy I almost called you by the wrong name in bed. She burst into laughter. The look on his face. I stared at her. Who was the guy? I don't know. She waved it off. Some dude from HR, I think. He was nice. Didn't freak out or anything. And your friends dared you? Yeah, it was a whole thing. You missed it. Why did you leave, by the way? I shrugged. Felt tired. Thought you'd notice. She leaned her head back against the couch cushion, eyes closed, smiling faintly. Well, next time, warn me. I was looking around for you during the tequila *TS. I didn't respond. Just looked at her, really looked. The flush in her cheeks. The way she talked slightly faster when she was nervous, which she was now pretending she wasn't. Her hair was a little out of place. There was a smudge of eyeliner near her temple. Her nails were freshly done. Dark red, which she usually reserved for weekends away. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But jokes like that don't come out of nowhere. You don't make up a name like Ryan unless it's already floating around in your head. Unless it's burned into your subconscious with enough heat to slip out when your guard's down. I thought about the way she had laughed in that room. The comfort. The chemistry. That wasn't a dare. That was a confession dressed as a joke. A breadcrumb she didn't think I'd ever find. And the worst part? She thought I wouldn't notice. That I'd just swallow the story and go back to being the observant, faithful husband who notices everything. Everything except the truth. I slept on the couch that night. Told her I didn't want to wake her when she went upstairs. She mumbled something half asleep and rolled over. I laid there in the dark, my eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. I kept replaying that one line over and over again. I almost called him Ryan in bed. And the way she laughed, like it was funny, like I didn't exist. That was the moment I stopped being naive. I didn't have proof. Not yet. But I had something stronger, instinct. That gut-level knowing we all try to silence in the name of trust. Except trust isn't unconditional. Not when someone hands you a mask and says, "Don't look behind it." Well, I'd seen behind it now, and I couldn't unsee it. After that night, everything shifted. Not in some big, dramatic way, more like a lens had finally come into focus. And what I saw through it made me sick. It started with the way she walked through the house. Like a guest. Not rushing, not slow, just careful. She used to kick off her shoes near the door, drop her bag wherever, and flop down on the couch next to me. Now she moved quieter. Like someone trying not to wake a sleeping dog. Me. She didn't ask why I'd left the party early. Not once. Maybe she thought I hadn't heard anything. Maybe she was counting on it. But that silence between us? It wasn't passive anymore. It had texture. It hummed. The next morning, I noticed she had 2 missed calls from a number with no name, just digits. She was in the shower, and her phone lit up on the nightstand. I wasn't the kind of guy who checked my wife's phone, but I stood there, staring at it like it was some ancient, cursed artifact. Then I walked away. I wanted to believe it was nothing. I needed to believe that. But when belief starts to feel like denial, you begin to question everything. I started rewinding the last few months, like going back through old security footage, scanning for missed moments. And suddenly, all those little things I'd shrugged off, they weren't little anymore. There were the networking events that popped up out of nowhere. Sarah never used to go to those. In the past, she'd even joked that she hated forced small talk in hotel ballrooms. But now, she was dressing up for them, like heels and perfume at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday. I remember her walking out the door one night with her hair done in soft curls, wearing a cream blazer I hadn't seen before. I thought this thing was casual? I asked. She paused, halfway out the door. It is, she said. But the venue is kind of upscale. You never know who'll be there. It had sounded reasonable then. But now I wondered, who was she really dressing for? Then came the work trips. 2 in 3 weeks. One to Chicago, another to Charlotte. Her company hadn't sent her out like that in years. I remember asking about them, pretending to be casually curious. What's the conference on? She had shrugged. Some HR compliance update. Super dry. And they're flying people in for that? She laughed. Guess they're trying to justify the budget. Her responses were quick, like she'd rehearsed them. And maybe that's what stung the most. The idea that she had a whole second script going on. One I wasn't invited to read from. She stopped wearing her old perfume, the one I'd bought her for our anniversary last year, and started using something new, stronger, muskier, not unpleasant, but not her. When I asked about it, she said, "Samples from work. Figured I'd switch things up." Everything was becoming a switch-up. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. I really did. But doubt kept cashing in favors I didn't remember promising. Even the way she used her phone had changed. She used to scroll with her screen facing me. Not because she had anything to hide, it just didn't matter. Now she angled it away, tilted it down when I walked in the room. Once, I saw her smiling at a message and immediately locking the screen when I sat beside her. She said it was a meme from her sister. But Sarah hated her sister's memes. Always had. It wasn't just about technology either. Her presence was different. She became distracted, forgetful in ways that didn't feel like forgetfulness. She'd forget to respond when I asked how her day was. She stopped making sarcastic jokes about my TV habits. She stopped sitting next to me on the couch like it was default. I remember one night clearly. We were watching a movie, some thriller with a twist ending, the kind she used to love. But she wasn't watching. She was on her phone texting. I asked who it was. She said, "Tracy from work. She's going through a breakup." I nodded, but I caught a glimpse of the name before she tucked the phone under her leg. It wasn't Tracy. It started with an R. I didn't ask. I should have. But something inside me, some tired, crumpled part, just didn't want to hear the lie I knew was coming. Then came the night she came home late from girls' night. I was half asleep when the front door opened. The clock read 1:47 a.m. She stumbled in, humming to herself. Her makeup was smudged, and her clothes looked different. Not dramatically, but the top she wore when she left wasn't the same one she came back in. Her earrings were missing, and I saw her drop them from her coat pocket as she walked past the bedroom door. She smelled like wine and something else. Cologne I didn't recognize. It wasn't hers. It wasn't mine. "Hey," I murmured. She froze for a second, then smiled too wide. "Didn't mean to wake you." "Fun night." "Yeah," she said quickly. "We were just, venting." I nodded, pretending to fall back asleep. But my eyes were wide open in the dark, listening as she crept into the bathroom and ran the water. She stayed in there for 20 minutes. When she climbed into bed, I kept my back to her. And for the first time, she didn't try to touch me. She just lay there, facing the ceiling. And so I started keeping count. Not of her lies, but of her distance. One morning, I made her coffee the way she liked. Splash of almond milk, no sugar. She barely sipped it. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah, just not hungry." That was the third morning in a row. Later, I noticed her favorite mug. The one that said, "Sorry I'm late. I didn't want to come," was in the dishwasher. Clean, untouched. She was tired all the time. But not the tired that comes from work. It was a kind of emotional fatigue. She'd drift through conversations like she was underwater, only surfacing when she had to perform. The irony is, she still said, "I love you." She said it automatically, like someone signing off an email. "Love you." "Yeah, you too." But the tone had changed. It didn't sound like home anymore. It sounded like habit. There were moments when I thought maybe I was being paranoid, that I was reading too much into things, that maybe I was just insecure, projecting, inventing ghosts in a perfectly clean house. But then I'd remember that voice in the hallway, that laugh, that name, Ryan. I didn't know who he was yet, but I knew one thing. No one invents a name in a joke like that. You don't almost slip and call your husband by someone else's name in bed unless that name lives somewhere very close to your mouth. So I waited. I watched. I listened. I stopped trying to fill the silence between us. Instead, I let it grow to see what would take root in it. And what grew was something I couldn't ignore anymore. Something had already broken, and she didn't even seem to notice. It was the third weekend in a row she'd left for a conference. This time it was Chicago. The email invite she showed me had the company logo, a schedule, even a QR code for registration. It looked legitimate. It always did. She left Friday morning, suitcase by the door, hugging me like she always had. Quick, arms over my shoulders, not pulling me close. I kissed her cheek, and she smiled. That fake tired smile. Then she was gone. I didn't follow her. I didn't drive to the airport or install some tracker on her car. I didn't even look up the hotel she said she'd be staying at. I just waited. Not for her to come home, but for her to slip. By Saturday evening, I was cleaning the living room when I saw her tablet on the couch. The one she always traveled with. She hadn't packed it. I picked it up, not intending anything. Habit, maybe, or curiosity. But then the screen lit up, and a notification blinked across it. Ryan, miss you already. Photo attached. My body went still, just like that night at the party. I didn't open it immediately. I set the tablet down like it might explode. I walked into the kitchen, ran water, drank straight from the tap. I remember my fingers shaking as I dried them. I kept telling myself, maybe it's not what you think. Maybe it's an old friend, a cousin, a weird joke again. But the voice in my head, the one I'd ignored for too long, whispered back, you already know. I sat down, opened the tablet and pulled up her messages. Not her regular email, not her work one. A third account I'd never seen before. The inbox was neat, tidy. But the photos folder had over 100 items. Most of them recent. Most of them from a name I recognized now with absolute certainty. Ryan. The first message was dated 2 months before the party. The first photo was from a hotel room in Boston. Her in a robe, glass of wine in hand, looking straight at the camera. He'd written, "Can't believe you're real." The next few were even clearer. Her lying on his chest in bed, her face tucked under his jaw. Her in his shirt, barefoot in a hallway. A blurry clip of them dancing in a mirror. His voice saying, "We should never stop this." Then Arkansas, a spa. One picture of her with her feet in a hot tub, captioned, "Could get used to this." A few selfies. A video of her whispering something into his ear while he smirked. One message said, "Still hearing your laugh in my head. Last night was perfect." Another read, "You make me forget I have a real life waiting back home." The final one, the most recent, was taken in a hotel room, lighting dim and warm. She was kissing the side of his neck while he held up the phone. His smile was wide. Hers was soft. The caption, "Until next time. And try not to say Ryan again next to your husband." I stared at that one the longest. Not because of what it showed, but because it confirmed what I already knew. That night at the party, it hadn't been a joke. It hadn't been a dare. It had been a real moment, a real slip, and she'd laughed about it. They both had. And I'd stood there, invisible, absorbing the hit without even knowing where it came from. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the tablet or punch the wall or storm into traffic. I just sat there, quiet, my hands on my knees, heart still, head light. It's strange how pain doesn't always explode. Sometimes it sinks, heavy, quiet, like stepping into a lake fully clothed. No splash, just wait. I closed the tablet, sat in the silence, watched the sky outside dim into dusk. I remember staring at the photo frames on the shelf, wedding pictures, travel sh*ts, her graduation. All frozen smiles. All lies now. I pulled one of them off the shelf. It was from our anniversary trip to Colorado. We were on a cliff overlooking a river. She was leaning against me, grinning. I looked at it closely. It hit me that in the photo her eyes weren't on me. They were looking off just past the camera. And I wondered now, was that the moment she started looking away from me altogether? After a while, I stood up and walked outside. I didn't know where I was going. I got in the car and drove until the city turned into trees and everything smelled like rain. I parked on a quiet shoulder of some road I didn't know, turned off the engine, let the silence wrap around me. And then, for the first time in a long time, I let myself feel it. Not the betrayal that was still distant, but the realization that I'd been living with a stranger. That the woman who had once cried in my arms over a sad movie, who used to tuck her toes under my leg on cold mornings, who said, "I'd never hurt you, I promise," was capable of orchestrating an entire secret life without blinking. She hadn't tripped into this. She hadn't been manipulated or swept away. She'd built it, carefully, silently, and made sure I was too comfortable, too trusting, too proud to look behind the curtain. But now the curtain had dropped, and all that was left was a stage full of props, a spotlight on an empty set, and me, the guy who thought he was the lead, standing there alone. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed out there until the sky lightened again, until the birds started chirping, and the fog began to lift from the treetops. Then I drove home, sat in the garage for a while, and when I walked back into the house, it wasn't mine anymore. Not really. It was just a space where two people had once pretended they were in love, where one of them still believed it. I poured myself a cup of black coffee, no sugar, sat at the kitchen table, the same one we used to play cards on Sunday nights, the same one where she once said, "I hope we never become boring." And I thought about how bored she must have been with me, with our life, with the safety of being loved unconditionally. She'd found her thrill. Now I had to find my exit. But not yet. Not that day. First, I needed to mourn the version of her that no longer existed. Or maybe never did. After finding those photos, I didn't confront her. I didn't call. I didn't text. I didn't even think of revenge. Something inside me had already gone quiet, like the sound after a G**NSH*T, when all you can hear is your own pulse. The moment I saw that message, "Try not to say Ryan again next to your husband," something clicked in my head. I realized there was no version of the story where I won by yelling, no world where she'd crumble into an apology that could rebuild anything. The game was already over. I just hadn't accepted it. So I decided to leave. Not in a storm, in silence. For 3 days, I moved through the house like a ghost, taking mental notes of what I'd need to disappear. She was still in Chicago, though I knew exactly which hotel she was actually in, the same one that appeared in those photos. I could have called the front desk, asked for her room, said, "Put my wife on the line," but what good would that do? Let her stammer, panic, lie? No, she'd already had enough stage time. I was done being the audience. On the second day, I opened a new bank account. Just mine. Transferred half of our savings, the amount that was legally mine, no more. I called my insurance company and changed the beneficiary. Then I went to the post office and requested a forwarding address. An old cabin my father left me years ago, deep in the northern woods near Lake Kelsey. I'd never even been there, but I remembered the coordinates, scrawled in his handwriting inside an old envelope. Suddenly felt like a map home. I spent that night packing. Not much: clothes, my tools, a few books, a photo of my dad from when I was a kid. Everything else I left. The house could have her perfume and her echoes. I didn't want either. By the third day, my plan was clear. She was coming home that evening. She thought she'd walk through that door, drop her suitcase, kiss me on the cheek, and tell some story about how the hotel Wi-Fi was awful. She'd probably bring me a souvenir mug, too. Something ironic. She always did. But instead, she'd walk into a house where I no longer existed. That morning, I printed the evidence, the photos, the emails, the thread. I didn't print all of them. Just enough. I laid them neatly on the kitchen table. I placed my wedding ring on top of the stack, centered like a period at the end of a long, unnecessary sentence. Then I wrote her a letter. Not angry, not pleading, just final. "Sarah, you once said that honesty mattered more than anything, that lying was the one thing you could never forgive. I'm holding you to your own words. I found the messages. I know about Ryan. I know about the trips that weren't trips and the laughs that weren't jokes. I'm not writing to fight or to fix anything. I'm writing because I need you to understand that I saw everything and still chose peace. You'll wake up tomorrow and I'll be gone. Not missing, just gone. Don't look for me. Don't call. Don't send letters. There's nothing left here worth explaining. I loved you once, truly, but love without respect is just delusion, and I've lived in that long enough. Take what you want from this house. It's yours now. T." I read it once, folded it neatly, and set it beside the photos. Then I cleaned. I don't know why, but I did. Wiped the counters, vacuumed, took out the trash. Maybe I wanted her last memory of me to be tidy. Maybe I just needed something to do with my hands. When the sun started to sink, I sat in my truck, engine off, waiting for the last bit of light to disappear. I thought about texting my friend Nick, just one message. I'm leaving for a while. Don't tell anyone where. Instead, I called him. He picked up on the second ring. Tom? Everything good, man? Yeah, I said. My voice sounded foreign. Listen, if Sarah calls you, tell her you don't know where I went. Not even a guess. He paused. Should I ask what's going on? No, but thanks. He hesitated again, then said quietly, Take care of yourself, brother. Yeah. That was the last real conversation I had before I left my old life behind. When darkness finally covered the street, I slipped the house key under the mat. An old cliché, but it fit. Then I looked back once. The porch light was still on. Always on because she hated coming home to the dark. For a second, I almost turned it off. Then I didn't. Let her walk into the light. Let her see everything. I drove north through the night. The roads grew thinner, the stars thicker. The silence out there felt like pressure at first, like I'd entered a vacuum. I kept replaying the moments that got me here. Her laugh in that upstairs room, the smell of unfamiliar cologne, the way she'd stopped touching my arm when she passed by. I remembered her saying once, If you ever stopped loving me, I think I'd know. And now I realized she hadn't known at all, because I hadn't stopped loving her when she cheated. I'd stopped loving her when I realized she could lie so easily. I drove until the gas light came on, then pulled into an empty station somewhere past the state line. The attendant didn't even look up. I filled the tank, bought a cup of coffee that tasted like metal, and sat in the cab staring at the reflection of the fluorescent lights on the windshield. It hit me then. This was the cleanest break of my life. No fights, no screaming, just the sound of tires rolling away from the wreck. By dawn, I reached the turnoff for Lake Kelsey. The dirt road was half hidden under pine needles and fog. The cabin was still there, sagging under years of neglect. Windows fogged, door swollen from the rain. But it was mine. I unlocked it, stepped inside, and breathed in the cold, dusty air. It smelled like time, stale and honest. There were cobwebs in the corners, a broken chair near the fireplace, an old table that could barely stand. I dropped my bag, lit a match, and watched the first flicker of fire crawl up the wood. For the first time in months, there were no pings, no messages, no footsteps upstairs. Just the crackle of fire and the sound of my own breathing. I poured a small glass of whiskey, not to drown anything, but to mark the moment. Then I walked outside and stood on the porch. The lake was still, not a ripple. The world didn't care what had happened to me, and somehow that felt merciful. I didn't cry. I didn't toast to freedom or curse her name. I just whispered one thing into the cold morning air. Done. And I meant it. The first morning in the cabin was so quiet, it felt fake. Not peaceful, silent. Like the air had been ked out of the world. No traffic. No buzzing phone. No muffled footsteps from upstairs. Just wind. Trees creaking. My own breath. I hadn't been up to the lake in over a decade. My dad had used this place as a hunting retreat when I was a kid. Back then it was full of camouflage gear, beer cans, and that distinct smell of gunpowder and damp pine. I remember thinking it felt like the edge of the world. Now it felt like a place time forgot. The cabin wasn't much. Bare-bones structure. One main room. A wood stove. A kitchen counter with cabinets that creaked every time you opened them. The roof leaked in one corner. The bed was a mattress on a wooden frame my dad had built by hand. Probably drunk. Still solid, though. That first day I didn't do much. Just walked the perimeter, made mental notes. Broken floorboards on the porch, mold in the back bathroom. A family of raccoons living under the crawl space. I chopped some firewood, mostly out of instinct. The rhythm helped. Lift, drop, split, over and over. The thud of axe into wood was the only heartbeat I could trust. I didn't think about Sarah. That's not to say I didn't remember. I did. constantly, but I didn't let myself think. That's different. Thoughts drifted in like fog, but I didn't chase them. I let them pass. That's how I survived the first few days. At night, I'd light a fire and sit in the old rocking chair by the window. I'd drink strong black tea, sometimes whiskey. I'd stare at the trees, let the heat soak into my bones. Sleep came in pieces. Dreams, too. In one of them, I saw Sarah standing outside the cabin, her face pale, pressed against the glass. I opened the door, and she said nothing, just cried. But when I reached for her, she disappeared like smoke. I didn't tell anyone where I was. Just Nick. And even then, not exactly. Just that I needed time. He didn't push. No one else knew. No messages. No calls. No Sarah. By the 5th day, I had a routine. Wake at sunrise. Chop wood. Brew coffee on the stove. Clean. Fix. Repair. That was the word that stuck. Repair. At first, it was just the house. Patching the roof, sealing the windows, clearing the junk my dad had left behind. But something strange happened after the first week. I started to feel capable again. Useful. Not because someone needed me. Not because I had a role to play. But because I was doing something. Something that mattered, even if it was just to me. There's something oddly healing about physical labor. The ache in your back. The splinters in your hand. They're proof that you exist. That your body still works. That you're not broken beyond function. Eventually, I picked up a job at a local construction site about 15 miles down the road. There was a small resort being built along the lakeshore, a modern place with solar panels and overpriced cabins. I drove down to the general store one morning, saw a paper ad on the corkboard. Help wanted, manual labor, daily cash. I took it. The foreman was an old guy named Carl, maybe late 50s, built like a tree trunk, didn't ask many questions. He squinted at me for a long moment when I showed up. You from around here? I shook my head. Just staying up by Kelsey. He nodded once. You handy? I can be. He handed me a pair of gloves and said, start tomorrow. We dig at 7. That was it. I didn't give him a last name. He didn't ask. The crew called me Tom. I didn't correct them. I wasn't running from who I'd been. I was just done being defined by it. Days bled into weeks. I kept working. I built sheds, poured concrete, learned to use tools I'd never handled before. I found joy in things like perfectly aligned boards, clean nails, even spacing. I stopped checking the calendar, measured time by weather and wood piles. One evening, the school down in town asked if anyone could help build a new bench for the playground. Carl volunteered me. I didn't argue. I drove down on a Sunday, cut the wood to size, sanded the planks, stained the legs. Took me 2 days. When I was done, one of the teachers, older woman, sharp eyes, asked my name. Tom, I said. She nodded like it fit. You do good work, Tom. It hit me later how strange that felt. Being complimented for creating something. For years, I just maintained. Paid bills. Picked up groceries. Supported Sarah. Held everything together. But this was mine. Back home, I started carving. Little things at first, knife handles, spoons, a small bowl. My dad had left behind a set of chisels in the shed. Dull, rusty, but still usable. I'd sit on the porch with the lake at my back, shaping cedar into something solid. I didn't keep most of it. Just left them in a basket by the edge of the road with a note. Take one. The silence wasn't loud anymore. It had shape, pattern, music even. Sometimes I'd think about her. Not always in anger. Sometimes just as a memory. I'd remember how she used to tie her hair into a messy bun while brushing her teeth. Or how she'd hum songs without realizing it. How she laughed during bad movies. I didn't erase those moments. I just stopped chasing them. What stayed with me most wasn't the betrayal. It was how easy it had been for her to lie. The casual nature of it. Like choosing a shirt to wear. That's what I was really grieving. The realization that someone can share your life and still keep a separate one entirely. And you may never know until they drop their guard or forget to pack their tablet. I started writing in a notebook. Nothing poetic. Just lists. Things I'd built. Things I wanted to try. Questions I wanted to ask myself. One page simply said, "What would you do if no one ever lied to you again?" I stared at that one for a long time. The answer, when it came, was simple. I'd build something real. Not with someone. Not yet. Just real. Honest. Solid. Like this cabin. Like this life. She started looking for me, through friends, family, old coworkers. I heard she married Ryan. A letter came with her new last name. I didn't reply. Locals knew me as Tom, the quiet carpenter. I built benches, walls, docks. Real things. No lies. At night, I remembered how she once said she wanted to build something real. Funny. I finally was. Just not with her. A year passed. I lived alone in the cabin I'd rebuilt, by hand, by choice. No echoes of her voice. No shadows of her betrayal. I saw her name in a business article once. Mrs. Miller. I tossed the paper. No reaction. No pain. I didn't live in her story anymore. I'd chosen mine. Freedom wasn't loud. It was standing on my porch with coffee, watching the sun rise, knowing I'd never again beg someone to love me right.